r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. Medical personnel, what was your first patient death like? She was a 24-year-old female who had just finished a couple of degrees and was about to take a year off to travel the world before becoming an adult. Came in for a checkup about 1 month before her flight. Metastatic melanoma. Tried all the things, including clinical trials. She passed 9 months later. That would have been around 20 years ago. She should be middle-aged now. I have forgotten her name, but I think about her approximately once a year. Nurse here. It was my first day of my career on my own when I was assigned to a newborn that was dying from a congenital tumor that was breaking down and wreaking havoc on her body. Midway through my shift the next day, career day 2, she died, just faded away, essentially having been made palliative a few days before I met her. We were in a wardroom and my former preceptor was assigned another patient assignment. It was nice having her close by, as she did post-mortem care on her patient. She walked me through the steps of post-mortem care for mine. Then we bundled them up and carried them down to the morgue, because I hadn't been before. She waited for me so we could go down together and she'd show me the way. At the end of the day I thought, I hope this isn't how it usually goes. Good news, it isn't. Middle-aged unhoused female from 10 states away came in off a bus with altered mental status and was determined to have metastatic breast cancer. She was in the hospital for months because of her violent, unpredictable behavior due to mets to her brain and need for parenteral meds. The last few days before she died, she was lucid and talked about her life. We tried to spend as much time walking and talking with her as we could. The day she passed, she stopped eating, walking, talking. She stopped breathing normally. She soiled herself, and we cleaned her up, making her as comfortable as we could with pillows and meds. We all stood around after we got her situated and stared at each other, knowing we may not have her much longer. Our charge nurse leaned down to her and said, "Name, you know we love you, right?" Her last word was yes. It was at least a couple of weeks with an entire floor's worth of staff in mourning, while still trying to carry on. 45-year-old male was brought in with hepatic encephalopathy secondary to cirrhosis, complicated by renal failure. He had no family with him, as he was found rambling and arguing with himself under a bridge. He kept talking to himself with a glazed look on his face as the IM residents tried to stabilize him. He was also severely hypertensive, and they found it hard to get an IV access. He ripped off his last one from the first hospital he was brought to. I was just a student at the time, so I was just in charge of taking patient histories, but as the patient was incoherent, I had nothing to do but watch. Quite suddenly, his eyes became clear. He wasn't focusing on anything prior, and he grabbed the hand of me and my rotation partner. "Please stay with me," he said while holding our wrists. Me and my partner both verbalized agreement. We were told to watch over him anyway in case he tried to run away, and stayed with him. After 20 minutes, he sighed, closed his eyes, and seized for around half a minute. Emergency team took over, but he was pronounced dead within 10 minutes. Me and my partner both had to step out to cry that day because it was the first time someone died right in front of us while holding us. Then we had to compose ourselves and come back in because the next patient was already being wheeled in. It was in my 3rd year of medical school during my surgery rotation. There was a woman in her 50s who had a small bowel obstruction and was needing to go for an X-lab. I had the opportunity to chit-chat with her the day of surgery, and she told me how her family was not aware that she was there, as she didn't want to be a bother to them. Before wheeling her back for surgery, her expression changed, and I saw her eyes begin to water. I had asked her if everything was okay, and she responded in a quivering voice, "I'm scared." I took her hand and told her that we were going to take care of her and would see her on the other side. This seemed to give her some comfort. Surgery went well, and she was returned to her room. Next morning I came in, and I found out she passed in the night from a massive pulmonary embolism. That interaction stays with me to this day. I'm a NICU nurse. Baby was born at 23 weeks. Mother had an infection in her placenta, so baby was basically born with an infection, and there's zero immune system when they're that premature. She fought really hard for 25 days. We cheered her on every step of the way. When she was born her eyelids were still fused shut, but I remember the day her little peepers finally popped open, and she looked at all of us with the most beautiful eyes. Her mom cried tears of joy and was so excited. The infection got worse, and her little body couldn't handle the inflammatory response. Her mom held her as she took her last few breaths. I spent time providing her with meticulous post-mortem care. I gave her a bath, dressed her, sang to her, and held her for a while. It was the first time I got to hold her, and I rocked her while singing and telling her how much she is loved. I thanked her for sharing her bright light with such a dark world. I carried her in my arms all the way to the morgue, and I collapsed to my knees when I had to put her into the locker. I then had to go back to my unit and work 8 more hours, as if nothing had ever happened. I still talk to her mother, even though it's been years. They are like family to me, and I'm so grateful to know them. Her sweet baby will forever be in my heart. I was on my first day of rotations in the neurocritical care unit, and first day of clinical rotations ever, and my preceptor had to respond to a trauma coming into the emergency room. Patient had come in several deep stab wounds, in traumatic arrest. Surgeon did a full clamshell thoracotomy, cardiac massage, intracardiac epinephrine, and a few other things to try to save this person's life. Lots of blood everywhere. Patient obviously did not survive. Since we were in academic medical center, afterwards, the residents and I got to learn about intrathoracic anatomy and physiology using the patient's body. 5 years later, I still have a clear image of the entire event in my head. And I now work in the ER. Guy admitted with presumed aspiration pneumonia. Sad case, guy in his 40s who suffered a TBI after falling from scaffolding at work and who had some degree of bulbar palsy and recurrent admissions with aspirations. Reported by his carers as coughing up mucky brown fluid. I was handed over to perform an ABG, and while I had the needle in his wrist he just sort of slumped backwards. Called the emergency bell, got the crash trolley, and started CPR, putting a Goodle and NP airway in. Brown liquid started shooting up the Goodle and NPA. Turned out the mucky brown fluid was coffee ground vomit. We worked on him for about 25 minutes without ROSC before calling it. My first year as a doctor, pretty traumatizing. The day shift doctor called me to say she couldn't remember if she'd prescribed his antibiotics regular or just stat, and would I mind checking. And in my state of shock I just said, "Oh, don't worry about it, he died." Not my finest hour. Only vaguely remember first normal death, but I do remember my first traumatic one early in residency. Early onset dementia patient. Lady in her 50s or 60s. Speech swallow team recommends that she can't eat or drink anymore, too dangerous. Family refuses to believe that this is a thing. Wants full code and wants to have the patient try and eat because she is going to get better in a few weeks and you are trying to just let her get worse and die. Family decides to feed her while visiting. Later aspirates and codes from hypoxia. We get ROSC. No reflexes, MRI brain EEG, just awful. Family feels that she is going to get better, and we are bad at our jobs trying to kill mom. Patient went to a care facility with a trach on a ventilator. 10 as old as time. Think about your end of life care, and talk to your loved ones and primary care doctor about it. She was in her 40s with schizophrenia. Had a tracheostomy, and was admitted in the ENT ward. She had no family staying with her and ended up with tubal blockage while the whole ward was sleeping. Choked silently until the nurse saw her and then suctioned the secretions through the tracheostomy. After resuscitation she was shifted to the ENT ICU, where I was on call. She went into hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy because of that choking incident and subsequently passed away 5 days later. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.